So we were going to stay with Mama, but there's a sick 3-year-old over there.
No, makes sense. This will be fine. So tell me their names again.
Kamal, which means silent warrior, even though he's not silent. And Naya, which means purpose.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Kamal and Naya.
Say hi. Say I decided
Good Lord, you are cute.
Say thank you. Taking care of twins is
no,
like
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's
Naya is so sad.
Yeah. Having a dream. I'm Sarah Williams. I'm a community organizer / grassroots activist / seeking revolutionary change.
Nice.
Yeah.
What organizations are you a part of?
I've been involved with Kentucky Justice Coalition and Rock Rebuilding Our Community. A lot of my endeavors, though, over the past year have been outside of any organization to just be extremely grassroots and open. So the people that I've been working with, there's like a Facebook page called Juneteenth Lexington, but that's not like the name of an organization or affiliated with a particular organization. We've invited all people of color to come to the table and see what we can do in our community to help build community.
So the Juneteenth celebration that we have here in Lexington, is this the first year that you've organized it?
We did actually organize one last year. It was rather small, maybe about 50 people, but we started to have what we call cipher sessions or cipher meetings where we just get together and talk about what's going on in our community and what we can do in our community. And we met 2 weeks before Juneteenth last year and actually pulled off that event within 2 weeks. So this will be actually the second one that we've done. There are other Juneteenth efforts that go on in the community. One in particular is pretty much the group of elders in our community that get together and plan something at the African Cemetery on 7th Street. And that's more of a history specific to the cemetery. And they do reenactments and things of this nature and pay homage to people who served in the military. So they'll be having that this year as well on the same day at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And then we start our celebration at 12.
Can you give us a little bit of the history of Juneteenth?
For sure. So the reason why Juneteenth is like really specific to celebrating in the Black community is that, you know, historically in this country we celebrate independence on the 4th of July. That's mainly what we celebrate is independence from Britain. And if you know, at that time in 1776, slavery was still alive and well. When you fast forward through how we get to liberation from slavery, from the ending of slavery, you have the proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation that was issued, but that actually didn't free a lot of slaves. So June 19th, 1865, there were a group of slaves in Texas that literally on that day found out that slavery had ended and that they were free. So the history of Juneteenth, that became like a holiday in the Black community that had parades, music, dancing, food. And it was something that, you know, in different towns across the country were recognized as a holiday within the Black community and that the white community would also participate in to some degree.
Is this something that the white community is invited to, or is it something that white people should stay out of?
White people are welcome to attend. Just be mindful of the space that you're coming to. You know, be somebody that is comfortable with coming to a venue that is, you know, most likely going to be the majority of people of color. Because as somebody who's biracial and occupied both spaces, I definitely understand that there are white people who might not feel comfortable in that environment.
What sorts of things can we expect at this year's celebration?
So what the day is going to consist of when we start at 12, we'll have food there that we're giving away for free, just to be mindful of people who might not have, you know, the money to purchase plates or food. And then we'll also have some other food vendors, specifically Caribbean food, and other vendors as well, selling various products, books, home decor items. And these are all of the vendors, for the most part, that are present outside of associated organizations that'll be present are Black-owned businesses. So we'll start at 12, cooking food. We will have some speakers, one on the history of Juneteenth, just to kind of educate. We have somebody that'll be speaking on farming that is part of a Black-owned farm in Richmond, Value Estates. A couple of other speakers as time allows. We do have some live performances, one called The Bluesmen, and then DeBron Thomas will be performing later on in the afternoon around 4.
Cool.
We will have some children's activities, and we'll wrap up all of the planned part of the day at 5. and understanding that people will probably still be present in the park, well after that time.
What is the Facebook page so that people can find out more about it?
Juneteenth Lexington.
Okay, so just facebook.com/Juneteenth Lexington.
Mm-hmm.
Get to it. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Are there still volunteer opportunities? Do you still need people to help out, or are you guys fully staffed as far as you know?
For the most part, we have all our bases covered. Yeah, I've reached out to various people that we've needed different things filled for, but I think for the most part, we have all the things donated that we need, and it's just a matter of getting the day here and pulling it all off. Yeah.
I know that this holiday this holy day is a celebration of the last enslaved people discovered that they were free. Mm-hmm. But what are your revolutionary aims for it?
I mean, part of the goal of this event and other events that this Juneteenth Lexington group has pulled off is to build community, because ultimately to truly reach an area of revolution or a time of revolution, we have to get out of this individualistic mindset into understanding that our fate and our well-being is tied to the next person in the community. And so even though this is a celebration of the ending of slavery, we are also very mindful of the fact that we're living in a time where chattel slavery has simply transitioned to slavery embedded within the system, specifically through mass incarceration in the criminal justice system, as far as the number of black men behind bars and the fact that black women are now the largest growing prison population, and the detriment that that's been on our community, because in so many ways that is slave labor. We have a history, and this is definitely the more revolutionary side of me, we have a history in the United States of passing policy that seems as if the intent of it is to help all people. Yet when you go and look further how a lot of these policies from the New Deal, literally, on up to legislation that was passed during the Civil Rights Movement, on up to even Clinton's welfare reform, overall in America and the way that it affected the black community from the way it was enacted has had serious detriments on us. Slavery still exists. It just changed forms. And if you haven't heard of Michelle Alexander's book,
The New Jim Crow?
The New Jim Crow, yes, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, then you definitely need to check that out, because that's something that's very basic to developing an understanding about that. If you're not a reader, then the documentary that's available on Netflix called The 13th, and I know there's been some screenings around town, check that out on your own, or see if there's another screening coming up, just to educate yourself about that.
These perspectives are relatively commonplace amongst a lot of people I know in the black community, mm-hmm. but they are very not commonplace in the white community. And maybe this is not a question that I should be asking a person of color, and it's just the thing that I need to keep wrestling with. But how do we show white people who are very committed to the idea that America is a fair place where justice reigns and where good will prevail, that has been for them, and it has come at the expense of people of color's thriving?
Well, that's a difficult thing to do. As somebody who's biracial with a white mother and has had to, I guess, contend with making her aware of some things that might not be readily obvious. And this is a woman that has worked as a social worker for 30 years in the community, so she's been able to see certain things, but still not able to totally understand my experience as her child, as a person of color. But you have to debunk white privilege. And debunking white privilege, the brainwashing that occurs from white privilege, because you have to understand the fact that white privilege, the embeddedness of white privilege within our society is at every turn, no matter what you encounter. And so being able to question literally everything you've been indoctrinated with, that you've been taught, and that you see on a daily basis is difficult. That's not easy for a lot of people. I mean, even when you throw facts, and you have it written down and you have all your sources, there's still going to be people that are not willing to see that for what it is. So all you can do is keep trying. It really depends on that person. It's kind of like the whole saying that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. There are no easy answers to that. And the best thing that I can say is to continue speaking truth. And people will accept it when they're ready. Or they'll just be angry. When you're not willing to accept truth or ready to accept truth, anger is normally one of the first things that pops up. So, I know SURJ that has been really active in the community and facilitating these conversations, and all I can say is continue to do so. Keep leading them to the water, and eventually, hopefully, more people will drink.
Yeah, it makes me think about what you said about community and the way in which we have to see our fate as tied up with one another's. And I think about James Baldwin and some of the things that he talked about is achieving our country. Is going to require that white people look not only at what we have done systemically and individually in our ancestors, et cetera, to black people, but what we have continued to allow, continue to be complicit in, and even continue to do actively against them.
For sure.
And without full involvement of people of color in our country, which right now is like on the ropes officially in a way that is still, to me, shocking.
Right.
That white people can't flourish as full human beings in this country either. And I don't know what the answers are, but I do think like the emphasis on community is really, really powerful, considering specifically Juneteenth. Do you think it would be enough in this country, or let's just say Lexington? Would it be enough in Lexington if we could build like a strong enough community amongst black people and other people of color that eventually white people would just have to fall in line?
I think in some ways, one thing that came to mind as you said that last part is that if black people are able to build strong enough community, that white people would just have to fall in line. In some ways, I feel like when we as black people, specifically in Lexington and definitely across the country and then across the world, the drop in the bucket that turns into the ripple in the wave, if we can build, and when we build community strong enough amongst ourselves, that involves a self-love that is powerful beyond measure, beyond anything else, that yes, I believe white people will have to fall in line to. I think that because I'm a very spiritual person, not a religious person, and I feel like if black people can learn our history, know who we are beyond slavery, because we're taught, oh, you were enslaved, we set you free, and now here you are. But there is so much more to that. We are the beginning of human civilization and have contributed, if you really do your research, a large part of the intelligence and the knowledge that goes into American society comes from our ancient cultures. And if we can develop that self-knowledge and that self-love, then there's a very powerful energy that gets set forth with that. And that's one reason why, if anybody who's followed some of my Facebook posts for any amount of time, I do hashtag build community, hashtag love liberates. And love liberates is not this concept that I came up with on my own, but actually something Maya Angelou spoke in an interview. Once we learn that self-love, then your interactions with those around you automatically dictate a certain level of respect. If there's a certain level of self-love within the black community, then how we allow ourselves to be treated. And how, because yes, there's complicity on the white part about what has been allowed to go on, but in so many ways, and this might upset some people in the black community with me saying that, in so many ways, there are many of us that are complicit to the system itself. And that's one thing about Juneteenth, and the goal of Juneteenth, to kind of wake people up, to don't be so complicit, to participate in your own subjugation and oppression, because that does occur within the black community. And I think, it's going to take a great awakening to this certain level of self-love that really the last time it was even close to being present would have been the 60s and the 70s. You have to think about the foundations of this country and the fact that we've never done the hard work to address the foundations of this country. The concept of race is not something that has existed throughout all time. The concept of race didn't begin to develop until it became necessary to have a subservient class of people that were willing to fill certain roles that the nobility didn't want to fill. And going back to the idea of building community and the fact that our fate is tied to the next person in the community, to everyone in the community, is a very African kind of concept. I'm definitely somebody that submits to the understanding that Africa is not just a geographic location, but a mindset, and something that we as a people across the world must return to, because the idea of individuals did not exist in Africa, in any country, in any tribe, in any culture, until we came into contact with Europeans.
That's an interesting idea, that not just that part of the resistance, it sounds like the African American community and people of color communities need to be working on, is also perhaps the biggest challenge for the white community. Mm-hmm. Which the white community really wants to take credit as individuals for all of their winnings. Mm-hmm. I got this degree, I worked hard for this house, for this car, for what I've gotten, I earned this. But if our ideals included our neighbor, then it's well, what does your neighbor have?
Right, and so let's address, historically the differences in socioeconomic status between the two races, because that has a very historical tie. Not only did the 100 plus, 200 years of slavery and then transition into modern day slavery help build this country on free labor, and all of the estimates that have been done is the fact that, we're really owed millions and trillions of dollars in reparations.
Totally.
That's a whole nother conversation. Then we fast forward to say like the 20s and 30s, when there was legislation passed where average folks could buy a home. What began happening then is the majority of wealth of an American is held in their home. And when you look at the 20s and 30s, when people were able to start making purchases to homes, you have what is called redlining, which was specifically set out by the federal government, where you have people of color in communities blocked off, and then you have white communities. The white communities automatically had higher property values than the communities of color or even immigrant communities. And if a person of color moved into the white community, then you have what's called white flight. But that began right there in ways that to build wealth, to continue to build wealth for white people in ways that black people, even once free from slavery and being able to work a job and being able to purchase a home, being able to be afforded certain rights within this country that white people had, it was still within a certain way of subjugation and oppression to keep us from acquiring a certain level of socioeconomic status. Because that's one of the most frustrating things in the work that I do at the moment, is understanding that our resources within the black community are much more limited than those in the white community. And there's definitely a big movement when we discuss black liberation and being free of this modern day form of slavery to build black economics. And then you look at the history as well. Let's say we're able to rebuild Black Wall Street. That's one of the ideas and goals that exist within the talk of black liberation within the black community across the country. Look at what happened to Black Wall Street as far as being bombed by the government, sanctioned by the government to be bombed and just totally wiped out.
Can you tell that story? Because
So in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the dates are sketchy.
It was 1920 or 1921, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
I believe so. Yeah, like early 1920s. So there was an area that had been built up as the Black Wall Street, where there were all kinds of black businesses. It was a very successful black community, and what ended up happening is actually it was bombed. Literally, they dropped bombs and it was kind of blown to smithereens. It was totally obliterated at that point. And it seems like when you look at our history that any point in which the black community has showed too much promise of being able to liberate, to be independent of the white supremacist power structure, is what I term it as, then the government kind of always has an answer for that.
For those of us who are white, who are still resisting this narrative, the white community can say, like, well, I didn't bomb, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like one of the core things that kind of has to fall, so to speak, in order for liberation to be reached. And I say black liberation, but as you mentioned before, so long as there are a group of people that are subjugated and oppressed, then the people that are receiving the privilege from that subjugation and oppression also face their own subjugation and oppression to remain complicit, whether consciously or subconsciously. Yeah. And I will say there is a book and an author that speaks about that, as far as, it's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeGruy. And she has, and if you don't want to check out the book, she has several YouTube videos. It's Joy, Joy, DeGruy, Degruy. And she has several YouTube videos, and she does spend some time speaking about the detriment that it is for white people to participate in this system. To achieve total liberation, though, it is going to take the collective coming together of all of us. I will say that one reason why, because a lot of people are aware of the extensive organizing I did around Black Lives Matter, around police killings here in the community, and largely participated in spaces that was open to everybody. And I reached a point where I began to understand that there are certain conversations and certain healing and certain things that need to occur within the black community that we need not have to face microaggressions or misunderstandings or have to spend, really any part of our meeting space or time addressing things that are, either subtle subconscious attacks on our humanity or outright. And so that was one reason why I decided to go ahead and focus on building a space specifically for people of color.
In your ideal Juneteenth scenario, is it just people of color? So that you can have a white free space where you don't have to worry about what white people might do, think, say, body language at you, etc.?
It doesn't necessarily have to be just for people of color. It just has to be people who are totally awake and aware of their privilege, whatever stereotypes they might hold. But at the same time, it's like I kind of tag onto the end of that. I realize there are not a lot of people like that. Because I will say, for some of the work I've done in the community, that's one reason why I decided we needed a space specifically for people of color. And I wondered how that would come across, for what work that I've done. Would some white people be offended that I wanted to make this space just for people of color? But I will say, some of your most dedicated people for social justice need to do an implicit bias test and really study what it is, who do they prefer to be around, because even though you might be one of the most dedicated people towards creating a fair world and endeavoring in social justice issues and community endeavors, like, you can still hold certain ways of looking at the world around you that is detrimental for people of color to encounter and be totally oblivious to it.
A couple of things come to mind. There's a white author and speaker, I cannot think of her name, but when she does implicit bias training, she does it for white people and they get real angry. But I remember one of the things that she said was that she always considers herself still racist, and that she says the goal is always just to do less harm. And so what she says is, like, I do less harm than I used to.
Right.
And that she's always trying to dismantle those, like, structures of racism that are inside of her.
Right.
And I think that as white people, that's a really uncomfortable place to come to where, like, you can stand in front of a person of color, whether a friend or a stranger, and say, I'm a racist. I'm trying so hard to fight it.
Well, and I think, we are products of our environment. And so I think when you take into account that we live in a society in which white privilege and black subjugation and oppression is perpetrated at every turn, whether it's within mass media, our education system, what have you, I think to truly be honest with yourself, you do have to reach a point where you admit that there's probably, most likely, going to be a part of me that remains racist. And I'll quote Audre Lorde, she said one of the greatest, efforts, and this is paraphrasing, not exact quote, one of the greatest efforts towards revolutionary change is to dismantle the pieces of the oppressor within ourselves. So, that's work for white people as well as people of color. And that all ties into either as a white person recognizing white privilege for what it is, or it ties into, as people of color, do you recognize how subjugated and oppressed you are within this system? Because there are a lot of people who don't.
I think it's a very painful thing to realize the extent to which our society, ourselves, our communities, our families, our children, etc., are all influenced by something that, like, is hard to call anything but evil.
Mm-hmm. And part of it is because it's so embedded within our historic foundations. Mm-hmm. And so we have to kind of go back and begin at those historic foundations to dismantle even the concept of race, let alone the fact that one race is less than another. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that comes from recognizing the history for what it is. If we taught history the way it has really occurred rather than the way it's been written in these whitewashed textbooks, then that would automatically begin to shift some things in what white people believe about what is the beginning of civilization, and for black people and people of color to recognize who they were beyond just being defined as slaves. That we were a great people, that we were intelligent people, that we had a civilization, one of the biggest that existed in ancient history, and that it has finally been admitted that the beginning of the human race began in Africa. I think if we can begin there, then that's a start. Will we ever get there? Time will tell.
How do you remain hopeful?
How do I remain hopeful? The fact that I have children, and the fact that, I think I had to reach a point, especially in all the work that I've done, and just being reminded of how deep these chains of oppression run, that true revolutionary change in which we are all totally free of this oppressive system and oppressive mindset as well, will likely not be complete in my lifetime. And so the fact that I do have 6 children, and 3 of them very young, I feel like that's why I do, if anybody's seen some of the pictures I posted on social media, I use the hashtag Raising Revolutionaries. And I think, a lot of that has to do with the mindset that I raised them with and the knowledge that I provide them outside of whatever, they encounter in the education system. That, yes, I remain hopeful. I just don't feel like it'll be our generation that finishes it. And I do believe it'll be the generation behind us, our children, that will go ahead and help do that. We can no longer exist within a capitalistic society that must always function off the detriment of somebody else. Because so long as we remain the country that we are with the historical foundations that we have, then this capitalistic society will always function to the detriment of people of color. That's the way it's been set up from the beginning. So even Michelle Alexander in her book towards the end, when she discusses solutions, recognizes that changes will not simply occur through laws. We can have the civil rights movement is a big example of changes occurring through laws, and even, as we talk about Juneteenth and the ending of slavery occurring through laws, it does nothing to change the mindset. And you have to change the mindset of the people. And for a lot of us that are past a certain age into adulthood, that is extremely hard to do. As a child, they're still hungry and they're still growing and they're still learning. So you can plant that seed to allow it to grow much easier. And we must build community in a way that seed that is planted is nurtured appropriately. Yeah. Change is not, and Audre Lorde has said this as well, revolutionary change is not like one instant moment. It's a continual process.
Yeah, and it's a process that even as, I guess, goals are met and major watershed moments occur, you never ever really get to stop.
Right. As far as remaining hopeful, I'm definitely somebody that feels like everything is energy, and the universe creator speaks. And so I make sure I take time to myself, and I take meditative moments, and I feel like, tune into that energy. And, things continue to shift. A lot of people look at Trump being elected is one of the worst things that could have happened in America. At the same time, David Banner, which is he's a hip-hop artist but also a revolutionary speaker that travels around the country, and one thing that he said after Trump was elected is that this might be one of the best things that could have happened to black people. And what he meant by that is that the election of Trump has shook a lot of people up, not just within the black community but also within the white community, and shook a lot of people up to feel the need to do something. You can look at all of the marches that have occurred across the country under various guises, whether it's, climate change or for women or for whatever cause people are identifying with. I think the biggest thing to look at with that is that people are actually moved towards action. Yeah. And really at the end of the day, this is one thing that I say, beyond just the issues of race and racism, we all are facing pretty much what I call a self-imposed apocalypse. That if we don't come together as an overall worldwide community and recognize that our fate is definitely tied to the next person, even the person in, a third world country that doesn't have access to clean water, then we're going to all be without clean water soon. What is it that the black community over in, say, the East End or West End side of town here, you might not see necessarily a tie to their fate, or the gentrification that is affecting the East End or even the North Side where I live at, as being an issue that you're tied to. But ultimately, within not so long a time, it's not going to take another 100 years. We're talking decades. We're going to be facing a time where food shortages and clean water are going to, just the very need to survive is going to be what needs to bring us together. I don't really want to wait till we get to that point to come together, because, that's only going to make things a heck of a lot worse. Mm-hmm. But, this system, this capitalistic system, not only perpetrates ills against people of color within America, but is destroying the planet upon which we all depend to have life. So just to kind of bring it to a broader perspective,
Juneteenth is about saving the world.
It's really,
yeah. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that ironically at all. That is what
really,
it is.
Really, it is. The deeper ties of liberation to it. Yes, there are very specific things when it comes to addressing the white supremacist capitalist power structure here in America, specific to black people. But that is tied to so much more. That is only a starting point for the real work that we need to do. It's going to be all of us, white people, black people, worldwide people, who are facing this self-imposed apocalypse if we don't do something to fix it. Yeah.
Okay, so Juneteenth celebration, noon to 5. at
Yes.
Isaac Murphy Memorial Garden on June 17th.
Yep.
The celebration of when everybody knew they were free.
Yeah.
Not just when they were free,
Yeah.
but like the community as a whole being knowledgeable about their freedom.
And I mean, and it's definitely the way I've put it to people. A quick way to explain it is it's Black people's 4th of July. It's the Black community's 4th of July. So, yeah. And definitely in understanding that this is, you know, the Black community's 4th of July, it is also a springboard, a sounding board, and a space to recognize that we still have a fight going towards liberation. And not just liberation within the Black community, but liberation of all people to be able to live free of a system that ultimately works to the detriment of all of us.
I don't know if this is like off base at all, but are there any sort of like guidelines for like white people like me who might want to come? Like, are there things that we should, obviously there's a mindset that we likely would have, which is that white supremacy is a problem and that we are complicit in it,
Right.
either actively or passively.
Right.
But are there other kinds of guides that we should follow? Like if we want to participate and come to Juneteenth, where people of color are celebrating like their ongoing path to liberation, like how should we behave? What should we do?
I think more than anything, it's the energy that you bring. I don't think that there's specific rules that you can apply because just like I said, revolution will not come through changes in laws. Making sure that you're respectful and mindful of this space that is celebrating Black liberation is not going to come through me saying do A, B, C, and X, Y, Z and follow accordingly, but making sure that within yourself you have a certain mindset in coming, as you mentioned, and that your energy in being there contributes positively to the collective overall well-being of everybody present. So I would just take a moment to look within yourself, like, what are your intentions in coming? Why do you want to join in? And your intentions in coming will be the energy that you set forth when you are present. Like, are you coming just to be a spectator? Because if that's your main goal and intention, then no. If you're coming to join in and to celebrate, come on, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah.